This is a HDMI port, and this one has actually been replaced. So if you look in the center of the port, you'll see that all the pins line up on the central platform. So when you plug in a port, when you plug your cable in, that's what needs to look intact inside the port. So if your port looks damaged inside, then it needs replacing. So this is an example of damage that you might see from an impact. So that's the first thing to look for. So this port has been replaced, okay, and this coin cell is here to demonstrate the size of things. Now, because the port's been replaced, we'd hope that this will be sufficient, but it might not be. So what you must understand is that behind the port are 19 pins, and these pins connect to the circuit on the back of the HDMI. They all have to be touching, they all have to be connected. You can see the circuit lines running here. They go to these EG690, EG70. Basically, those are filters which are connected to the system. And then we've got the HDMI retimer or encoder IC, depending on what console it is. It might be a PlayStation, it might be an Xbox. This is an Xbox Series X. So sometimes what can happen is the port gets damaged, and then additionally, until we replace the port, we find out that the chip needs replacing. Also, on top of that, so if I flip the board over, on the Series X and the Series S, we have an underside with more components. And again, if I put this battery here, just for size comparison, you can see how minuscule things get on this board. And not just this board, but on a PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3, pretty much anything electronic has these small components everywhere, okay? And what you must understand is that sometimes as well, what can happen is the port can be impacted so severely that the whole port shunts backwards. And if you look there very carefully, you see component EG24. EG24 is right behind the port. And so if this port was to get pushed back under tremendous force, say for example the HDMI cable's been inside the console and the console has fallen on the floor, that component is at risk to being sheared off the board, as well as the pins to the pads. So the pads which connect the HDMI port to the board can shear away from the board. So that's additional damage that can happen as well. So as you can see, yes, it is just a HDMI port, but there is a lot more to it than just the HDMI port. So we would hope to replace the port and that would be it. But in certain circumstances, you have to be aware that other damage can occur to your console. And we might not know until we've replaced your port, unfortunately. Anyway, I hope this detailed explanation about a little bit about HDMI repair makes you understand that it's not quite such a simple thing to do. here's an example of all the HDMIs that we've replaced. And there's an example of all the chips that have been replaced. And if you look carefully, you'll see Panasonic chips in there as well. Those Panasonic chips are from PlayStation 4s, and the other ones are from PlayStation 5s, PlayStation 4 Pros, and Xbox One consoles are the other chips as well. So there's quite a lot in there. But yeah, those are all the ports that we've done. So believe us when I say this, we hope that your HDMI port repair would go okay. But sometimes there is more to it. As I've said, sometimes it's a good outcome, sometimes it's a bad outcome, and we have to replace other components behind the port. If your port looks severely damaged from this side, the chances are there could be more damage on this side. So this is an example of HDMI chip failure. Basically, what's typical of HDMI chip failure is the screen will flick off and on, or you'll get graphical artifacts coming in and out of the screen.